Chapter 224 Iron Hand Song. A servant walked in with a wooden bucket. When he saw Sanshi beside the well, he was stunned for a moment before he opened his mouth and screamed. A ghost. Sanshi's face darkened when he saw this guy turn around and run away in fear. What ghost? It was not easy for him to make a trip back home, but in the end, he had become a ghost in the eyes of others. In his depression, Sanshi slapped him away. Swoosh. He instantly caught up to him and stepped on him. He said angrily, "Which eye of yours saw that I'm a ghost?" The bucket rolled out. The real feeling of being hit made the servant come back to his senses. He was so frightened that his face was scrunched up. He turned to beg for mercy. "Young hero, please spare me. I'm not knowledgeable enough. Please forgive me. Tell me, where are you from? Who is living in the Song mansion?" Sanshi questioned. "Young hero, this is the residence of the Song family. Elder Song is the master." The servant answered with a grimace. Sanshi frowned. "Where is he?" "Elder Song has gone out. I heard that he's visiting the famous martial artists and cultivators in the city." The servant said meaningfully. "Young hero, our Elder Song is a Kane expert." Sanshi was deep in thought. "What's his name?" "Sonhai. He is known as Iron Hand Song," the servant said proudly, thinking that Sanshi was afraid. He continued, "Our elder is now famous martial arts master in the city. Fourth brother." Sanshi was stunned. In their generation, there was only one man who learned martial arts. The fourth son, Sonhai. As for the reason, it was indeed because Sonhai's talent was not bad. He was recognized by Elder Kin and was sent to the Divine Palm sect to cultivate. It was similar to Songjia being sent to the spiritual sword sect. "And you are?" Upon hearing Sanshi addressing his elder as fourth brother, the servant stole a glance and realized that they did look a little similar. Sanshi recited his origin. Sonhai was the only one of his generation who had a good relationship with him. The first time he went to a brothel, Sonhai brought him there. "Young master of the Song family. Aren't most of the men of the Song family dead?" The latter was surprised for a moment. He thought of something and felt his blood run cold. He crawled back in fear. "What are you afraid of? I'm not a ghost." Sanshi knew at a glance that this fellow had misunderstood him. He walked out angrily and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When he turned around, he could not see Sanshi. The servant's face turned pale as he scrambled away. In order to avoid trouble, Sanshi flew out of the Song residence and landed in an empty alley. He spread out his thoughts and many voices surged over. "Buy some buns, they just came out of the oven. Don't miss them. A bowl of Yan Chun noodles, less spicy please." There were many sounds of hawking in his ears. Sanshi seemed to be deep in thought. It seems that the situation is much better here now. Dizziness has recovered a little. As he walked out of the alley, a lively scene appeared in front of him. There were not many people, but it carried a hint of the mortal world. After a year of chaos, the city has finally calmed down a little. I hope these days can last. It's difficult, although Great Jin has recaptured Jinzhou. The price they paid was very high. Now, the control is not as good as before. All kinds of demons and ghosts can walk around the city freely. Sigh, commoners like us can't afford to offend them. Just hi. It's better to live than die. His gaze swept across a restaurant. From some discussions, Sanshi found out that Jinzhou had been conquered by Great Jin and had temporarily settled down. Looks like the rebel army has been declining in progress recently. Sanshi was actually a little happy. Not only was Jinzhou his hometown, but he also preferred stability. Even though he was in the demonic sect now, he felt that Great Jin was more suitable for ruling this city and the demonic sects who killed people like flies. After all, many people in Jinzhou had lost their lives because of the demonic sects. Looking at the scene that resembled the past, Sanshi was in a daze. His profligate life seemed to have only happened yesterday, but now he was doing well in the cultivation world. "I'm no longer immortal, I should disguise myself a little." The air around Sanshi distorted for a moment. When he turned to street, he looked like another person. He used the 1,000 transformations technique and transformed into a youth. This person he transformed to was still himself, but a him that was only 12 or 13 years old. After walking around, Sanshi saw some familiar faces, but he did not recognize most of them. These people were people who had fled from other places and settled down here. "Let's go watch a fight between experts." Haas fighting. It hard that it's Iron Hand Song from the Song family and the consecrator of the Sun family. One is a young expert, and the other is an old famous person. It will be worth watching. Suddenly, the street in front of them became chaotic. A group of people shouted and rushed into the distance. It sounded like they wanted to watch a show. How gossipy. Song Shi's gaze flickered as he walked over. The person who started the fight seemed to be someone with his fourth brother's nickname. If nothing went wrong, they might be able to meet. It wasn't easy for him to go home, hence he still had to meet with his loved ones. He shouldn't make a wasted trip. Song Shi's footsteps were light. He looked carefree, but in fact, his speed was faster than some people running. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the entrance of a luxurious mansion. This mansion looked even more imposing than his Song family's manor. There were two 10-foot-tall lions at the door, looking mighty and domineering. However, at this moment, the head of one of the lions was shattered, and there was an additional palm print. Its position was also lacking in symmetry with the other lion. Half of the lion's head fell to the ground, and there were a few footprints beside it. They were deeply embedded in the ground, and many of the stone slabs were shattered. At the side, two figures were fighting quickly. One had a goatee and his feet were like sharp knives. He kicked out at a dazzling speed and occasionally landed on the limestone floor, smashing it into pieces. Goatee's opponent was a young man in his 20s. He had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a strong physique. His kung fu was all concentrated in his dark palms and it collided with his opponent's sharp feet. The destructive power of the two of them was not small. The area within 100 feet was in a mess. When they attacked, wind and waves surged, bringing with them a series of whistling sounds. When Song Shi saw the young man, he grinned. This guy has actually reached the Khanate realm. Has quite impressive. I remember that he hasn't been home for 3 years. He recalled some things from 3 years ago. At that time, he did not see Song Hei's strength. He only heard that Song Hai would not return for a long time. Now that he had turned from a mortal to a golden core cultivator, and that he could even easily kill ordinary golden cores. This Song Hai, who was originally stronger than him, suddenly looked like he was fighting an old man in slow motion. Song Hei's entire body was steaming hot, and his hands were dark red, as if they were filled with flames. He could tell at a glance that this was the Iron Sand Palm, also known as the Divine Sand Palm. This was a cultivation technique that he had once cultivated. He did not expect Song Hai to use this technique to reach the Khanate realm. The explosive power of the Iron Sand Palm is strong, but his foundation is still a little lacking. If he continue fighting, he will suffer more losses than wins. Song Shi muttered. Indeed, not long after, Song Hai began to fall into a disadvantageous position. Looks like Iron Hand Song can't defeat this expert of the older generation. An arm can't win against a thigh. Not to mention a hand. I think the Iron Sand Palm can't win against the saber leg. What do you know? It's obvious that has not skilled enough. That is the real reason. The onlookers, who were hiding outside the aftershock, pointed and pointed, making people think that they were the real experts. When Song Hai heard the discussion, he became anxious and his movements became more and more unstable. At the door, a middle-aged man in a brocade robe sneered. Song Hai, you still want to take something of ours? You're not good enough.